We want to just say welcome to everyone for joining us on today. And of course, welcome to our presenter, Dr. Justin Porter. He is our State Director of Special Education, Texas Education Agency, and it's always a pleasure to do a webinar with him and for him to share information with all of you. We're going to first start out. I think Katrina is going to share our just initial introductory information. Let me make sure I am sharing the right thing. All righty. So while she's making that transition, we are SPEDTEX, the Special Education Information Center for the state of Texas. We're a collaborative project between Texas Education Agency and Region 10 Education Service Center. We provide information and resources, collaborative support for parents and for educators as well to work together for service provision of students with disabilities, fostering positive outcomes. You can reach us if you ever have questions about special education in general or specific. Give us a call, 1-855-773-3839, and on our website, www.spedtex.org. You can also live chat with our special education experts. And you can also send us an email and send us a message directly, and we'll be able to reach out to you to provide support and resources. One of the organizations we have the pleasure of working with on a regular basis is Partners Resource Network. So Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you or Christina.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin. I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. And also joining me today is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. And the projects in Texas are known as PACT, PATH, PEN, and TEAM. At Partners Resource Network, we strive to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. We do this through a network of highly skilled, regionally located coordinators who are knowledgeable in local policies, services, and resources, as well as state and national level guidelines. We provide training, information, and one-on-one assistance to parents and youth. We serve parents of children and youth with disabilities from birth to age 26, as well as youth self-advocates between the ages of 14 and 26. All of our services are provided in English and Spanish. And for more information, you can check out our website at prntexas.org. And you can also like and follow us on Facebook. Thank you.
Gracie, you're muted. My apologies. And now, without further ado, we are going to transition over to Dr. Justin Porter. Welcome, Dr. Porter.
Hi, Gracie. Thanks so much for having me today.
We're glad you're here.
I actually have, because one of the questions that was given to me for today was around the new SSES. Those folks gave me a couple of fancy slides. And so what I did was I took those slides and I just added the rest of the questions that y'all had sent into a slide deck. And there's a couple of links here and there throughout that. So if it's all right with y'all, I'll share my screen and go through those slides, and then I'll provide that, excuse me, to SPEDTEX and PRN afterwards, and they can post it for everybody so they can have access to those links, if that works for y'all.
Oh, definitely. Ashton, I believe, is going to give you share rights. So go ahead, sir.
Well, just because somebody lets me do it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to figure it out, but we'll see. There we go. It's going to be that. So now are you seeing, there you go. Are you seeing my slide deck?
Yes, we can see.
Now let's see if I can, if anyone on the call works from home, they will understand my angst here. My second monitor died yesterday, and so I'm having to only work with my laptop screen, which means, let me see, why is it not working? There we go. Okay, which means that I am a little bit at a disadvantage. If I seem like I'm off my game, it's because I'm under one monitor, and that's pretty rough. So, all right, are you all seeing the title slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
So one of the first questions that was given was about supplemental special education services, a new program. It's actually an existing program that has been continued and given more money by the 87th Texas legislature. So we're going to talk about that for just a minute here. And then, as I mentioned before, there are some links embedded in this deck that we'll make sure and provide to y'all regarding this. But so what is SSES? So and a little bit of background, this was, we had provided the SSES program only for students who had, only for families of students who had significant cognitive disabilities with some federal money that we had previously. And then the 87th Texas legislature expanded that eligibility. We'll talk about that here in a second. So just a little bit of background. When I say this was existing, it was in place before using some federal money. And then our legislators actually gave us some state money to continue the project and actually to widen the eligibility criteria so more families can take advantage of it. So in a nutshell, what is SSES? It's a program that gives $1,500, one-time grants to families of students served by special education who are enrolled in Texas public schools. So this money is to purchase educational goods and services for their students. It's not just for anything that they want or need. It's not, no one's taking a trip to South Padre with this money. This is specifically related to educational goods and services. So with these SSES accounts, families are able to purchase educational goods and services from a marketplace. So if you'll think of the online store like Amazon, it works as if, and we'll give a little more details about this later, it works as if someone has given you an Amazon gift card. You put it in your account, and then you go to Amazon and you buy things. There's an extra step here of that someone from TEA has to approve the purchase. But so there's a limited number, a small sort of an online marketplace where you can look for these goods and services and then purchase them directly from there. There's no cash given to families. It just works through that online marketplace. So who is eligible? In order to be eligible for the SSE grant, students must be currently enrolled in a Texas public school in either pre-K all the way through 12th grade, and then they must be a student with a disability served through special education. And the new eligibility criteria will begin on November 1st. As I mentioned, there is a currently existing program that we're still working with right now that was just for students with significant cognitive disabilities. But now, beginning November 1st, we'll be able to put the new eligibility criteria into place. And so that will be the bullets that are listed there on the left. The students who are enrolled in a Texas public school, pre-K through 12th, who are served by special education. This is a first come, first served grant, and accounts are limited. So when the money is gone, the money is gone. Families with eligible students are encouraged to apply as soon as they can on or after November 1st. This question we've gotten this a couple of times: can families apply more than once? No, this is a one-time only grant. Families can only get this grant once per eligible student. If a family has previously applied and is now eligible, do they need to apply again? They do not need to apply again. They will get account information soon. So if you applied under the previous program, that information is being transferred over to the new program. If you were denied before and now you meet the eligibility criteria, that will happen automatically through the system, and you'll hear from us. And then for more information, there's a full website there with some videos, sses.tea.texas.gov. And then also that link that's there has some videos from some testimonials from families, which you might find interesting. And I'm not looking at the chat, so Gracie or Stephanie, if there's something in there that y'all think I could address, please let me know.
Will do.
Yep. Of course, I just opened there we go. So now we'll jump right into some of the Q&A, the questions that I received. Maybe if I can get the slides to advance. There we go. What are the virtual schooling options that are available for students receiving special education services? And so by and large, they are the same options that are available to students outside of special education, so students who are not served by special ed. Some of our kids in special ed will be eligible. You'll have likely heard of Senate Bill 15, which was passed in the special session, which allows for some students to be served in virtual virtual classrooms, and for the districts to receive funding for that. So certainly some of our special education students will be eligible for those options if your school district is providing it. If your school is not providing an option under Senate Bill 15, or perhaps your child doesn't meet the criteria, then really the only way for there to be an option is if the ARD committee determines that long-term virtual instruction is required for the provision of FAPE. And so there's a couple of different things there, but really it comes down to the ARD committee decision. They have to determine that there is no other way to provide FAPE to your child in order for them to be eligible for a virtual option. And then this sort of goes hand in hand. If my student receives virtual instruction, how will his or her inclusion time be addressed with general education peers? And that really depends on how your school district is setting up the virtual option for you. In many cases, those classrooms would be mixed, would be students with disabilities and obviously students without disabilities participating in the same class. It just really depends on what your school is doing. And there are some scenarios in which there might not be an option for that inclusion, and then that is something that will have to be addressed. Sorry, my dog is choosing right now to play with your new toy. Sorry about that. We got a new toy today, and it's very loud. That's just too individualized of a question really to be able to answer broadly for everyone. There's lots of different ways that schools would be attempting to do that, but it's going to depend on your individual situation and the situation of your district and what exactly they're choosing to do. I would say that it's important for you as parents to advocate for that inclusion time and for those needs to be met. We certainly want all of our kids in the least restrictive environment possible, and that means included with their non-disabled peers to the degree that's appropriate. And so we would definitely want to make sure that you're advocating for that when you're talking with your district about how those needs are going to be met in a virtual setting. There were actually, and I haven't had a chance to talk to PRN or SpedTex about this, there were actually a few questions about dispute resolution. And there's enough here and there's enough new things happening with our dispute resolution and complaints process that I think we probably need a whole webinar dedicated to that. There's a new online form that it would be awesome if we could have a chance to, we can either do that through a TEA webinar or through PRN, this same webinar, it's whatever the group wants to do. But there's a new online form for complaints submission that I think it would be helpful if we were able to step folks through that to make sure that they understand how to access it and where it is. And then also the dispute resolution handbook that TEA publishes has recently been updated, and it might be nice to be able to walk through, make sure folks can find that and then walk through what some of the changes were. There were minor changes. There wasn't anything broad change there that would really have an impact, but it might be nice just to walk folks through it. And a couple of later slides, I actually link to that document, the dispute resolution handbook. But so we can talk more about that later. This is a question, unfortunately, that we get pretty regularly from this group. The school district's not following up the IEP. What are my options to make sure that my child gets services? And obviously, first and foremost, you're always going to hear me say that the school principal should be the first person that you talk to. If you've already done that and you're not getting anywhere, then the school district special education director is your next best bet. Those are people who can really make things happen very quickly in a school district. But if all else fails, if those lines of communication there are not proving helpful for you, then you really should consider filing a complaint or a special education due process. And there's information about that in the dispute resolution handbook that I mentioned earlier that's linked here. And again, if we can put that webinar together, I think this group would find that super helpful on what the process is specifically for filing a complaint. And then kind of close to that, IEP implementation. What should the ARD committee consider when determining needs for compensatory services for my child because he's missed so much instruction due to COVID? So what the guidance we've given and the guidance that is consistent with the IDEA is that ARD committees need to review the impact of those lost services and determine what the fastest, most expeditious and efficient way to address that impact is. A lot of folks get caught up because sometimes this is the way that compensatory services are awarded. A lot of folks sometimes get caught up in we missed 37 minutes of X service, so therefore we have to replace that with 37 minutes of X service at some other time. That may very well be the most appropriate way to address that. But in a lot of cases, that's not gonna be very helpful for the child. Sometimes there just isn't time in the schedule to do that. And so really, they have to sort of look and see, how are we going to address the impact of those missed services? What are we going to do differently? How can we provide more service in order to make up for that over the long term, without necessarily thinking of it as a one-to-one correlation? Because sometimes it is a one-to-one correlation, and sometimes it's not. So really, it is just each individual ARD committee needs to look at that, do that analysis, and make those determinations. And obviously, parents are a very important part of that process in making those determinations for their children. Some services obviously lend themselves more to a one-to-one correlation. A lot of times, speech services, for instance, that's what we need to do to make that happen, because speech is so sequential in nature in the therapy and how it's addressed. But all things need to be considered. This comes up again in another question, so we'll have a chance to talk just a little bit more about this in a minute. Accelerated instruction. How can the ARD committee address the need for accelerated instruction as required by House Bill 4545 without overloading students and families with services? This is sort of tied to compensatory services as well, because if we're adding more time already to a child's calendar, it's just to a child's schedule, it can be very difficult to do this. But that's why the ARD committee really needs to have all of that information in hand when they're making these determinations and planning for this, so that they can plan accordingly, so that there is benefit to that, and that we're not just overwhelming students and families that with time, because that would be counterproductive. So really, they need to look at all the information, everything that's available to them, and just make good decisions individually based on that child on how to make it all happen in a way that makes sense for those impacted students. And then connected to that, can a parent decline the accelerated instruction required by HB 4545? Not currently. And so there is some discussions around in the legislature around some different things related to HB 4545, but right now there is not necessarily an opt-out. Back to compensatory services. What guidance and or funding has TEA provided or is providing districts regarding compensatory services? So throughout the pandemic, early, and then again at the end of the summer this year in the Strong Start Guide, we provided school districts with some information around compensatory services and the need to provide them, and what sorts of things to look at when they're making those determinations. But so that's out there in a few different places. The crux of it is not the crux. I think the bottom line is that IDEA provides language around compensatory services, and that's what we've tried to make sure is really clear for families and for school districts. Most of it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about addressing the impact of the loss of services. So making sure that you are looking at what needs to be provided now in order to address the impact of missing those services, so that we can get students caught up to where they need to be as quickly as possible. LEAs have been given significant amounts of federal funding related to COVID that they could choose to spend on compensatory services. So some of that is tied directly to IDEA. That money has not yet hit districts, but it's in the pike, and on their way there is $275 million coming through the system to LEAs specifically for special education. And then there was quite a bit of other money related to COVID supports through other forms through other federal programs that could also be used to address this need. But again, I think that $275 million that we've talked about is going to go a long way with LEAs to help them address this, and they should have access to those funds in the next probably 6 weeks. What should a parent do if the school doesn't have a plan for providing compensatory services for their child? The first thing I would do is request an ARD committee meeting to address that. And so if you've already done that and you disagree with what the ARD committee what the art committee determined at the end of that, then you have the same rights as you would in any other case in which there's a disagreement on the art. So there's a process in your district for that. And then if that still doesn't get you the result that you're looking for, I would again direct you to the dispute resolution handbook and stepping through the processes there. Once you've talked to the principal and the special education director, for sure. I never would tell you to do anything to delay the filing of a complaint, for sure. I certainly don't want you to do that. It's just that encouraging you to talk to principals and special education directors, a lot of times that can get things resolved faster than a complaint could. But you know your district better than I do. You know your school better than I do. So you need to make that determination individually. If you think that that a district is not following the IDEA, then you absolutely have the right to file a complaint, and you should do so. So that information is in that, like I said, in that dispute resolution handbook, and we will have hopefully have a webinar about that topic sometime soon. If you are in that situation right now and you're concerned about it, certainly give TEA a call. Our complaints team is ready, willing, and able to help you filing a complaint if you think you need to do so, absent of any other guidance or help from us. You can always give TEA a call for that. SpedTex is also a great resource for that. They can get you to the right person at TEA as well. So if you're in that situation now and you feel like you are at the point where you do need to file a complaint or file a due process, go ahead and give TEA a call, and we'll help you with the process. This last question is on this slide, sorry. Is high impact tutoring supposed to take the place of compensatory services for students with disabilities? It is not, and neither is the accelerated instruction related to HB 4545. However, back to this earlier question, I mentioned this would come up again. When you're in the art committee and you're determining how to address the impact of the loss of those services and creating compensatory service plans for kiddos, you should definitely take all of that into account for a couple of different reasons. That's time. The kids are going to have to be involved in either that high impact tutoring or accelerated instruction, if those are appropriate for that child or required for that child. And then from that point, determine what else do we need to do, what else is there time to do to address those needs associated with the lost and missed services. Across the board, it could be lots of different things. It could be, like I said, related to just different services that are maybe not academic in nature. Maybe they are related services, things like that. Working out how we're going to fit those in, again, without overwhelming the child and the family, because that would be counterproductive. And so it has to be approached individually. You have to look at everything that's happening with that child and what all their needs are, and make sure that you can come up with a plan that will best address all of those needs. This question is also related to the high impact tutoring. Is TEA is providing those funds? How can this impact students with disabilities? And so there isn't really a separate funding stream or program around tutoring for students with disabilities, but for many of the students in a school's tutoring program, that would be appropriate for them, and they should be included in it. And so it just would depend on what your individual campus is doing related to that high impact tutoring, how that's happening, and making sure that that you and in your school are advocating for the needs of your particular child and including them in that high impact tutoring program as it is appropriate for them. I think that's it. Yes, this is the Spanish version of the same. Let me stop sharing, and then we can see if there's anything in Q&A or chat. I talk really fast. I'm very aware of that. I've been working on it all my life, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. But if there are some questions we can address, Gracie or Stephanie, I'm happy to do that. Also happy to tell you I don't know the answer if I don't. So.
Well, I will go to the Q&A section first and see. There appears to be some questions, Justin, about SSES program as established by Senate Bill 1716. Will it begin on November 1st, the new version of the SSES program?
That's the new criteria that we mentioned in the slide deck. Yep.
Okay. That's a couple of questions about that. If a child has a vision impairment, can a child get books in Braille that are also in print for the accompanying parent? I guess what types of materials can be bought with the SSES funds? Yeah,
so there are already a lot of things in the marketplace that I think would cover most of the needs that people are going to have. However, there is also a process. If there's something that you think would be appropriate to have there, and you can't find it, for instance, perhaps a particular Braille publisher or something, there is a way to submit through that process, to submit a request for X, Y, or Z to be included in there, and then the folks at CEA will do their best to try to find a vendor to provide that,
Okay.
if it's deemed appropriate, obviously.
There are several questions about House Bill 4545. And so we can't get to all the questions, so I'm trying to pull them together here. The timeline for when an art committee should address those requirements for HB 4545.
So they should be, if they haven't done so already, they should be doing so right now. They should be involved in that and knocking that out pretty quickly. In discussions with LEAs around that, we've said that there will be a little bit of flexibility, given the law required actually that it was done before before school started. No one's met that. No one has met that for every one of their children in their school district. I can guarantee that. Well, I shouldn't say that, because there's going to be some district somewhere with 12 children who they have addressed it. But for the most part, most districts weren't able to meet that. And I think the legislators, when they passed that law, knew that would be a big ask for this first year. I think you'll see a different stance from TEA and less flexibility in the future on that, because there should be more time for it. But right now, they're just being told to get it done as quickly as possible. They should have already started the process and should be well down the road to having most of their kids taken care of by now.
And question, can the art committee agree to forego interventions?
They cannot.
Okay.
Yeah, no, right. As things stand right now, they cannot.
Does a student who takes STAR alternate 2 need to do the 30 hours of accelerated instruction?
So students eligible, the accelerated instruction piece, the specific way, the accelerated learning committee and the accelerated instruction piece of that law only applies to students who are eligible to take STAR. So if your child was eligible to take a different test, or the only other test there is the STAR alternate 2, then those specific requirements around what the accelerated instruction needs to look like don't apply to those kids. They have to address it. There has to be a plan to address it, but it doesn't have to be the 30 hours and the same as everyone else.
Okay. There's also a question about if a family is awarded the SSES funds, how will they be notified? Will they get an email or?
Yeah, it's through the same process as it has been before. They submit an email address or a phone number, and it's through either one of those.
Okay. And what happens when there are 2 or 3 students in a family, 2 or 3 students that have disabilities within the family? Is each of those children eligible?
They are each eligible. Every child who's eligible, it's not once per family, it's once per child. And so if you have, we have had some questions of folks who received an SSES grant under the previous system, and they wanted to reapply again under this one. And that's where that question comes in of no, it's really once per child until the money runs out. But it's but not once per family. So if you have 2 or 3 children in the same family who would be eligible, then each one of those children would be eligible for the account.
Okay. And now to the topic of virtual instruction. So if the district is not providing virtual instruction, but the parent wants to do virtual instruction for a child, should that be a discussion in an art committee meeting?
So it's actually, the art committee would have to determine that it was required for the provision of FAPE in order to sort of force the issue there. So the art committee would have to make that determination that there's no other way to provide FAPE to that child. So that would be the next step there.
Okay. Another SSES question with regard to assistive technology. Is that something that can be purchased with those funds?
Yep, sure.
Okay, well, all righty then. Stephanie, I know she's looking as well, so I'm not trying to hog all the question mics because it's a bunch of questions. Hold on just a moment. Let me go back to our Q&A. Have you seen some additional ones, Stephanie?
I'm seeing a lot of repeats, kind of the same
Yeah.
thing in Q&A and chat. So I'm scrolling through to see if there's anything else.
And we
Justin-
actually, I'm sorry. I'm seeing a lot of the previews come through with questions about HB 4545 and around that. And if y'all wanted to, you could come through those. And if they're bucketed into certain things, we can set something up to make sure we can get specific answers for some of those. Because some of them that I've seen come through in preview are really specific, and I won't be able to necessarily answer those broadly for everybody.
Okay, Justin, for the accelerated instruction, A question is about, is it 30 hours for each subject? Example, math.
It is. Yep.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, well, we will get those additional more individualized questions from the chat, and we'll share those with you and see where we can get some responses for those questions.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else on Stephanie that you noticed that stood out as a general question we can answer at this time?
No, I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay.
I've seen a few previews come through about dyslexia, and I can make a couple of just broad statements about that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of very specific questions that I'm not going to have very specific answers to, but a lot of folks have heard that the State Board of Education passed a pretty significant change to the dyslexia handbook on this 4th of September. That actually goes into effect 20 days after it's posted in the Texas Register. This is all very technical and bureaucratic language, but at some point this fall, we anticipate that going into effect. We are currently working to provide LEAs with information about how to implement that once it does go into effect. But just know that those, and we'll also be providing some information for families around what that should mean if your child is in the process of an evaluation for dyslexia, what that should mean going forward. But just know that we're not ignoring those questions. There's lots of them there. There's not a lot of specifics yet, as the rule isn't, the handbook isn't quite into effect yet. But we should be working, or we are working, sorry, to get that information out through LEAs, and we'll be sure that SpedTex and PRM both have all the information as it becomes available.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you being here. Please keep us in mind should you have any questions or concerns about special education to contact us at SpedTex. Stephanie, would you like to share some additional information about Partners Resource Network?
Absolutely. So thank you for letting us be a part of this webinar. We appreciate working with you at SpedTex. And so just a reminder that upcoming events throughout the state and our webinars are available on our website at prntexas.org. And you can like and follow us on Facebook for more information and reach out if you have questions. We have regional coordinators across the state ready to assist you.
All right, thank you, everyone. And we will get this recording on SpedTex and Partners Resource Network's websites. Thank you so much, and y'all have a good rest of your day.